I'm sorry to be the one that tells you this, but we are collectively looking down the barrel at significantly higher prices across the board on our phones over the next few years. If you thought the $1,000 flagship was a tough pill to swallow, and it is, you haven't seen anything yet. Put simply, buying a smartphone this year in 2026 is about to suck, but let's get into it. If you're new around here though, and you want more tech news, Android tips and industry deep dives, then hit that subscribe button and join the community and become part of a growing movement. Cheers. So without trying to fearmonger here, and I understand that's probably that sounds insane given the subject of this video, I think to understand what is happening right now, we sort of need to look back at how we kind of reached this stage more broadly. If you remember the original iPhone, that launched at about $500, even the first Samsung Galaxy S series phone back in 2010, it was relatively modest at about $400. Basically, for nearly a decade, we'd lived in a world where $600 to $700 was the gold standard for what we considered a premium device. Then in 2017 came the iPhone X, which at least in terms of popular hardware was the first to truly break that $1,000 barrier, and suddenly, well, the floodgates opened. That was it. Samsung followed suit with an Ultra branding a few years down the line, and within a few years we had Pro and Ultra devices. They basically became justifications for adding a couple of $100 here or there to the MSRP or the RRP every couple of years. Without giving anyone a pass for those exorbitant jumps, at least those increases were usually tied to tangible hardware leaps, so things like better OLED panels, 5G modems for instance, improved cameras, more cameras, and other unique functionality. Think the S Pen, that kind of thing. Now, what we're seeing in 2026 is sadly entirely different. This isn't a luxury jump or a new form factor fee. We are seeing a massive surge in component demand that is unlike anything that has probably, or we've seen for decades. This isn't just your standard supply chain issues or logistics headaches that what we saw back in 2020 with COVID restrictions. It's a complete shift in favor of, AI. Primarily though, and not exclusively, this is thanks to increased component demand from AI companies. When OpenAI, Google, and Microsoft are all fighting over the same production lines to build out their massive data centers, the little guys, and I use that lightly, even as I say, smartphone manufacturers are not small in their own right, they get pushed to the back of the line, or more accurately, they have to pay a massive premium to keep their place in line to the hardware that they need access to. In basic terms, the chips used for high-end AI servers, HBM or high bandwidth memory, are far more profitable for companies like Samsung and SK Hynix than the LPDDR chips found in your phone. Because of this, production capacity is being shifted away from consumer electronics that we use day to day in our pockets. It's just not a simple RAM storage shortage anymore. Memory is basically becoming like gold dust for companies. Just ask any PC builder or repair shop right now. Yes, it is a minefield of pricing for components that 6 months ago were in some cases a fifth of the price and really easy to get hold of. Between data center expansions and ongoing tariff complications, practically anything not built entirely within the US is seeing its cost floor raised. We've seen reports that corporations like Amazon are publicly signaling that lingering stock of currently unaffected products are also starting to dwindle now as well. Even brands like Nothing, who pride themselves on giving you that bang for your buck value, are beginning to signal that they might not have to, or they might have to adjust pricing relatively soon, which is another concerning aspect. What does this mean for anyone looking to buy this year though? Well, if you aren't ready to go off the grid or live without a mobile device or stick with whatever you have that is currently in your pocket or in your hand, you're going to have to face some tough choices this year. Smartphones are already in the needs category for most of us, whether you're due a long-awaited upgrade or your current device met an untimely fate just recently from a bad drop, for instance. A lot of people are going to need, not want, but need to buy a new phone at some point this year. And as I say, the era of the $600 flagship killer feels essentially dead. That's another conversation for another video, but we're looking in a world where $1,200 is the new baseline for a supposed Pro model phone. And if you want the Ultra or the Fold experience, you could be looking at almost $2,000 for that. It is a bitter pill to swallow, especially when you consider the hardware, at least hardware innovation, has felt just a little bit stagnant over the past few years. As I mentioned in a previous Samsung video, which I will link down below, complacency is the enemy of progress, but now we're being asked to pay more for that same complacency, which feels counterintuitive and a bit disrespectful to us buyers. There is a silver lining here though, and it's a bit of a double-edged sword, as the retail price for these new flagships like the upcoming Galaxy S26 or the rumoured Galaxy S26 start to climb and other Android phones also climb as a result of these changes, we're likely going to see a corresponding spike in things like resale values of the current lineup of technology. In a normal year, tech does depreciate faster than a new car driving off the forecourt, but 2026 isn't going to be a normal year because the buy new price is potentially going to become astronomical. More people are going to flood the secondary market looking for deals. This means that potentially the Pixel 9 Pro that you have in your pocket right now is likely going to hold its value much better than its predecessors did if it hasn't decreased too much already. That said, they haven't been all that expensive over the past few months, so yeah, that could be a bad example. Some analysts out there are actually predicting that the used market will grow by over 10% this year alone, which already is a pretty sizable market anyway. If you're the type of person who babies your phone, I'm one of these people, I'm talking things like screen protectors, heavy duty cases, all that kind of jazz, then your diligence could pay off this year. When you go to trade in that device or sell it on the private market, you could potentially net an extra, I don't know, let's say $100 to $200 in retained value. That might be one of the few things keeping a 2026 flagship phone within reach of your budget, rightly or wrongly. So how do we get around or at least try to mitigate this? Well, if you're looking for advice outside of panic buy right now, which to be clear, we're definitely not recommending here to anyone, you do have a handful of potential options. First off, you might have to settle for last year's hardware rather than getting a shiny new object over the next coming months. I know, we all want the latest razzmatazz, but let's be honest for a moment. Take, for example, the OnePlus 13. It's an absolute beast. It's one of my favourite phones over the past 4 or 5 years. I still think it is one of the best phones for most people to look at here in 2026. At a discounted price, it's an incredible upgrade from an older phone. Basically, if you can snag any 2025 flagship at a discount before the 2026 models reset the price ceiling, then I think you're essentially beating the house a little bit. You'll get 95% of the features of those new phones, but potentially for around 60 to 65% of the price, which to me seems like a massive, massive win. It also helps that the mid-range Android phones, or mid-range Android phones in general, continue to be pretty much incredible across the board. I'm thinking specifically, or when I talk about mid-range, I kind of think about the Pixel A series. We are a Pixel-focused channel here nonetheless, so the Pixel 9a was one of my favourite launches of 2025, and I think at about $400, maybe $350 thereabouts, it's a complete and a no-brainer, especially as the upcoming 10A is expected to be just more of the same, effectively the same phone in brand new clothing, as it were. Annoyingly, on top of this, analysts have also predicted, though, that budget-friendly devices are potentially going to be the ones bound to get hit with the highest percentage price increases. So if a phone has a lower ceiling, there is basically less wiggle room for the manufacturer to absorb raw material and hardware costs. They can't just shave a bit off the profit margin like they can with, say, a $1,500 or $1,500 Ultra phone. By picking up a solid mid-range device now or very soon, you could potentially hedge your bets against the inevitable price hike which is coming to this budget segment over the course of this year. Another solid option that a lot of people still use, and I recommend myself, is refurbished or renewed devices. Amazon, Google, Samsung, and loads of other brands out there offer renewed phones. And usually these are discounted, they tend to have extended warranties, and they also have lots of things that have been updated and upgraded, potentially like the battery, maybe a new screen replacement, all that kind of thing. I think this is a really good way to get a practically new phone for lots cheaper than the retail price. Finally, and this is probably the most practical device I can give anyone, and I think, yeah, you could distill this video down to this one piece of advice and listen to it. Just stick with what you have. Most people do this anyway, sensible people that is. You don't upgrade every year, and I don't think anyone should anyway. This isn't some amazing secret or solution, but of course we've reached the peak of peak smartphone, as it were, where phones 3 years ago are still remarkably capable across the board. In a lot of cases, I probably still will be using something like the Galaxy S23 Ultra if I weren't doing this as a job. So yeah, devices like those, you can get them at exceptional discounts, used devices, refurbished devices. I just think it is a really, really good way to get a great experience, especially as updates are very readily available for Samsung and Pixel phones. You're not going to have a bad time either way. If you are hanging on to a phone that is starting to show its age, I do think sometimes just a new case or even a fresh screen protector is all you need to make an old device feel kind of new again, as it were. If your battery's starting to tank and you're tethered to a wall charger 3 or 4 times a day, don't look at it as a sign to buy a brand new phone. a professional battery replacement is a complete and utter drop in the bucket compared to a brand new phone, as you can usually do these for around about $100 or so, under $50 in some cases. I think if you can make your current hardware last until 2027, 2028, you might just bypass the worst of this pricing turbulence altogether. Ultimately though, the sad news is that 2026 is shaping up to be a rough year for anything with a processor in it. It doesn't include phones, it includes everything. Whether it's AI demand, RAM shortages as a result of that, or the shifting geopolitical landscape, it's difficult for me to say that, of manufacturing in general, the easy days of cheap tech could be behind us for a little bit of a while, I think. Making preparations sooner rather than later, whether it's saving up or having a tech fund or fixing the phone you already have, I think is probably one of the major and only easy ways to stay ahead of the curve. But look, I don't have all the answers. I don't claim to have them all. I'm just trying to give you some practical advice and give you a little bit of an insight of why things are changing. I want to hear from you though. Are you already starting to see price hikes in your region? I know it hasn't really kicked off yet, but we're probably going to start to see that more readily, especially as someone who's a PC builder. RAM prices are just out of control, as are storage. But are you planning to jump to an upgrade, or are you looking to upgrade this year? Are you going to try and hold onto your phone for a little bit longer to try and bleed out a little bit more life from it? Let me know what you think down in the comment sections below. It's always interesting to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching though. Just remember to stay savvy with your tech choices. And as I said, as always, I'll speak to you later. Cheers.